Welcome to the Fantasy FootBaugh Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Baugh, and today we've got a mock draft Monday. Pay no attention to the fact that it's not Monday, it's Wednesday, a little bit behind here this week, but hanging in there and coming to you again by popular demand with the mock draft as a live draft from Draftkings as we jump into best ball madness for the $20 million prizes in play here. So I've already joined the league. We're just waiting for that draft to start. And just as a recap, if you didn't catch the last one, I'll be drafting a live entry into the Draftkings, $20 million, $3 million first. They give it some crazy name. I don't even know what it's called. NFL Best Ball $20 million Millionaire $3 million first tournament, in which there are 12 teams. It's PPR, trio wide receiver plus a flex, and it is best ball. So, of course, for those unfamiliar with the format, what that does is it takes your highest scoring players on a weekly basis, inserts them into your starting lineup, and you score that way. So, in essence, it is 17 weeks of a DFS contest where you're trying to draft that highest scoring lineup. After the first 14 weeks of play, you advance into that next round, and then there's 3 or 4 weeks of playoffs. It might be the first 13 weeks. I don't know. I'm unclear on the rules. Week 17 is the championship, in which all of the teams that have advanced past those first 3 rounds meet in the big old bowl at the end of the season, and the winner takes home $3 million. So we've got a live draft for that. I'll share my screen so that you guys can see what I'm going through, and as we go, I will, of course, be showing and talking through my thought process of all of my picks. Looks like we're just waiting on one other person to join. So just some theory as far as what makes this a little bit different when it comes to this particular format. Again, it is that best ball. We are placing a little bit more emphasis on a couple things. Those spike weeks for guys like Jameson Williams and for guys like Christian Watson, Quentin Johnston, the guys that go long. Trey Tucker, when he had his 40-point week, right? That could win you a week in this and give you that valuable points from a guy that you'd take in the 16th or 17th round in this format. So you will notice too that 20 rounds of this is a lot of rounds. There are some players at the end of this that you'd never consider rostering in redraft that I get so excited about because this is fun, right? It's fun to know who could be fantasy relevant if an injury happens. It's part of the fun of this whole thing. And what I like about this as well, as we're prepping for real draft season, these are really, really sharp rankings, right? To where the people that are here and that determine the ADP on this site are playing for money. This is coming straight from Vegas. These are based on Vegas projections. And so definitely a lot better than ESPN, where you can find just some crazy value. I know I talked about it before, but A.J. Brown being ranked 30th overall is just a travesty. Right, and should never happen. And I know that there's, a month between now and your fantasy football draft. But if you want to get a real mock draft in, and I call it a mock draft in air quotes because this is a real draft, go to Draftkings, play the $20 million tournament that they've got on here, and you'll find out where guys are actually going off the board. So we've got 50 seconds until the draft starts. Of course, with 3 wide receivers in this format, there is an emphasis on the wide receiver scoring. You typically draft 8 or 9 of the wide receiver position because, in theory, they're going to be scoring for you 4 times. And let's say that you've got the 6th pick or the 4th pick and you take Puka Nacua and then he gets hurt or has a bad week. You're relying on the people on your bench to fill in for that position. So really, you need 2 solid running backs, and you can field those from 5 or 6 guys. I'd say like hero or zero RB is very common in this. You see a lot of guys going for that strategy because they figure that if they draft, one good running back who's reliable week over week, some combination of Ray Davis and Jaden Blue and Isaiah Davis and Braylon Allen will supplement that second running back slot. Whereas if you take 3 wide receivers in that first couple picks, you're in good shape to have those spike weeks with the elites at that position. So we are standard so far with Jameer and Bijan off the board. Jamar Chase goes 3rd, as he should. Where I'm at 6th, I'm looking at Christian McCaffrey. I'm looking at Amon-Ra St. Brown, unless somebody slips through the cracks. I think I lean towards Christian McCaffrey here. Oh, and wow, interesting. So Christian McCaffrey went off the board at, what is that, fourth, which leaves us with an interesting decision here at pick 6 that I didn't really anticipate. I don't know, especially in this format, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with taking Christian McCaffrey fourth, but a lot of times you're dealing with almost portfolio management. And so these guys like me have already drafted 50 plus entries into this. Maybe he just wanted another share of Christian McCaffrey. I have no problem getting another share of JSN. I do have some concerns with JSN this year. If I had to put a label on like my favorite first round picks, JSN is kind of towards the bottom of that list. And I know that might be blasphemy to say. He was last year's wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2. Obviously a fantastic player. I just think he was historically efficient in a low volume passing offense where he commanded like 40% target share. I don't know that that's sustainable. I don't know that he's going to have exactly the same year that he had last year. I think that there will be some more targets to go around to guys like Rashid Shaheed as he gets ingratiated into the offense a little bit more. And even like a Torrey Horton could take some targets. The ghost of Cooper Kupp, I just don't see him getting back to 40% target share. But obviously, if he's available at 6 in a format like this, you have to take him. I do have him higher than Amon-Ra, especially here in Best Ball, where it's kind of auto-filling those players for you. I think that he'll have spike weeks more often than Amon-Ra, and Amon-Ra is more of a steady 15 to 25 point guy in PPR. There are some weeks where JSN, and they need to throw the ball a whole lot. He'll get you a solid 35, right? And that can win your week. That's the type of performance you're looking for, and then you can back that up with some solid guys or more floor plays on the back end. So all of which to say, I'm excited to have JSN as kind of the cornerstone of my team here. We'll be looking at who is coming back around on the comeback. Definitely some interesting picks. And I like these when they go and deviate from ADP a little bit. So we got Christian McCaffrey at 4th. Unusual, wouldn't do it. I've got my concerns with Christian McCaffrey. But again, you want to stake your claim. If you want to make that bet and that assumption that Christian McCaffrey is going to replicate what he did last year, more power to you. I do have him as my 3rd running back off the board. There is just a lot of risk baked in, especially to draft him 4th overall. He's getting old. He had like 400 touches last year, and historically that's not worked out super well for running backs coming off of a 400 touch season. But obviously you're playing this game as a parlay, you're playing this game as a bet that your top pick is going to stay healthy. And I like that bet for Christian McCaffrey in this format. I just don't know if I'd take him 4th overall. But obviously you play to win. So again, some more interesting picks. We had Saquon Barkley, leapfrog James Cook, and Ashton Jempty here. Ken Walker went 13th before James Cook. And I am on the clock in 1 pick. I was hoping that A.J. Brown would come back around to me. Looks like our choice here at 19 is really between Achane and Brock Bowers. And this is an interesting one. Do I want to go premium tight end here, or do I stick with a running back? I feel like Devon Achane is too good to pass up here. And I'll tell you why. I'll talk about this pick a little bit. If you can get Achane at, what was that, pick 20? 19? I think that's a little bit hard to pass up on. I think he's the last elite running back that you can find in a format like this. Listen, he'll be their wide receiver 1. Right? Who else is going to catch passes? I know as we get into pick 200, I'm going to be really excited about a Jalen Tolbert or Chris Bell, even Greg Dulcich, right? Who might be the pass catcher to get there in the Dolphins offense. But even if the Dolphins are putrid and they go behind by 30 points every single game, which is a real possibility, that offense is just going to be dumping off to Devon Achane like every play, right? And so I don't mind that. I actually think in my last live mock draft here in this format, I took Devon Achane in about the same spot. So I don't know if that makes me bullish on Achane. I just think it's a good value when you get to pick 19 or 20. You can get a guy that I would lump into kind of that same tier as a Chase Brown, a Derrick Henry, a Ken Walker, an Ashton Jempty, a Saquon Barkley. I don't think there's too much of a gap there. Obviously, his offense will be terrible, but I think he'll make up for that with a lot of catching passes. Josh Allen, first quarterback off the board at 25, about where he should be going. I would have taken A.J. Brown there. I've talked about this before. I'm really, really bullish on A.J. Brown. I think he belongs in that tier of wide receivers, right, with CeeDee Lamb and Justin Jefferson. I think him and Drake May is a match made in heaven. I think Drake May is fantastic at throwing the long ball. And so I don't really see a world where A.J. Brown is not a surefire wide receiver one with some huge spike weeks. So any redraft formats where I can get A.J. Brown, I'm totally taking a flyer on that. Trey McBride off the board, Emeka Ibuka, who I think may be getting a little bit overinflated. I know he got injured last year, and I'll make my pick and then talk next. Okay, so who am I drafting here? I think it really comes down to two guys. I want a wide receiver at this position. And so it's between Chris Olave and Zay Flowers. I've taken a lot of Chris Olave before. Zay Flowers is an interesting bet. He had so many yards last year and 5 touchdowns, right? And so it's disappointing when you have a guy that's not going to cash in on pay dirt. I think I'm actually going to take a chance on Zay Flowers. In redraft, I think I would have Chris Olave over Zay Flowers. I made that selection for a couple reasons. One, I was looking at my player distribution and where I've been drafting folks, and I've done about 70 of these so far, and so I'm about halfway there to the goal of 150 to max out this contest. I've got like a 5% ownership share of Zay Flowers, and so I've made a mental note to get another share or two of him in the next couple drafts that I do, even if I have to reach a little bit. So while I would probably advise and do have in my rankings Chris Olave over Zay Flowers, I think Zay Flowers is a good pairing with JSN as well. Listen, if Zay Flowers doubles his touchdown output, he's a top 5 wide receiver, right? And I think in a passing offense that doesn't feature a whole lot of other receivers, it's kind of a safe bet. I think Derrick Henry might regress a little bit. And I know we say that every single year. But with Derrick Henry, if he takes a step back and doesn't punch it in from the 1 or 2 yard line every single drive, there's an opportunity opened up without Isaiah Likely on the team anymore for Zay Flowers to command some of that touchdown share. And so I think there's a world where he does outperform Chris Olave. Listen, I like Chris Olave. I think that offense is going to throw a lot. Obviously, I don't know how much of a target share Jordan Tyson is going to take. I think they've got some other good receiving options there in New Orleans. And so I'm just not as sold as him being the surefire alpha that you'd want from a pick 30. Whereas Zay Flowers, I mean, you know he's going to be the guy in Baltimore when it comes to catching passes. And so I'm fine with that. I don't mind ranking Zay Flowers here over Chris Olave. It's good to start out with double wide receiver and a running back too. We're really focusing on flex here at this spot. I hate to reach for too much of a QB or a tight end at this position, especially once those premium options have been off the board. We did have somebody take Joe Burrow at 35. I think that makes a lot of sense if you've got Jamar Chase or if you've got T. Higgins even, but they don't. And so I'm a little bit curious of the mindset for that. Would have been fun if Lamar Jackson came back around, and wow, Lamar Jackson went off the board really early too. I didn't even notice that. To 28 for Lamar Jackson after, again, not even stacking it. Colston Loveland off the board, much too early for my liking. Our decision is between a couple players again. I have gotten a lot lower on Travis Etienne, I think, as the offseason has progressed. And I'll tell you why in a moment here. I'm between 2 players. It's really Terry McLaurin for me, or it's Josh Jacobs. It's hard to pass up on Josh Jacobs here, and I think I will go ahead and lock in that selection. Surefire RB1, there's really nobody else in Green Bay competing with touches. And listen, you're not drafting fantasy football players based on how good of a guy you think they are. I know he's had some issues here in really the past couple weeks. I don't foresee that holding him out at all. And I know a lot of the fantasy football pundits are a little bit scared of him right now, but let's say that, and again, when we play this game, we are making a parlay that all of our players are going to stay perfectly healthy and outperform their ADP drastically. I think if Josh Jacobs plays an entire season and you get him at pick 43, I mean, that is a steal, right? It has to be. We're talking about a guy that is just a set and forget RB1 that can be kind of the steadying hand in relation to Devon Achane, who admittedly might have some bad weeks because of how terrible that Miami offense is going to be. There will be some weeks where Miami scores 3 points. And then to have the running back in that position to where if they're down by 30, are they really going to be trying to come back in that scenario? Most likely not. And so there are some weeks where I am concerned about Devon Achane. back that up with Josh Jacobs, who will get 15 to 20 touches every single game in competitive games for a good team that's going to be at the goal line a lot. I mean, I honestly project that he'll get between 85 and 90% snap share, again, on a good offense. So if he plays the entire season, very valuable player to have. I am hoping that Terry McLaurin makes it back one more pick to me. That would be awesome, right? Because I was considering taking him in the last round anyway, and he does. Wow. And so at pick 54, we lock in Terry McLaurin. You guys, I am liking how this draft is shaping up so far. Think about this in redraft, right? We've got, if you're looking at this team 5 rounds in, you've got Devon Achane, Josh Jacobs at your running back positions. You've got Zay Flowers, JSN, and Terry McLaurin as wide receivers. That is a pretty unbeatable team. I mean, that is 3 surefire wide receiver ones on their team with really no competition for target share. Again, I'm kind of missing out on the spike weeks from like a Christian Watson or a Jameson Williams, but I think over the course of the season, if we're talking about which of these 12 teams will progress to that next round, I like where I'm at so far. So as we look at the board here, yeah, I mean, that's a really, really solid start through 5 rounds here. Now, I mentioned I was going to talk about Travis Etienne, or is it Etienne? I don't know what he changed his name to. I know he wants us to pronounce his name, so my apologies, Travis, for mispronouncing your name potentially. I've gotten lower on him as the offseason has gone on. You'll notice that everybody else in this room kind of has as well. He went behind Quinshon Judkins, Josh Jacobs, Cam Scadaboo. I think that's for good reason. I think Alvin Kamara is still kind of hanging around in that offense. I'm not sure how well he'll work in that New Orleans scheme. I think they're going to throw the ball a lot. I think as a pure runner, I don't know that he's a guy that can go out there and win you weeks. And so in New Orleans, without his role being super carved out, a guy like Josh Jacobs, like, you know, you're going to get 85% of the snap share from him. He's going to catch passes, even though he's not really known for it. He'll get a couple targets a game. Etienne, I'm not convinced that he's going to have that big of a season to where we should be ranking him 39th, right? Which is about where he's going in a format like this. So earlier in the offseason, I did take a lot of shares of him. I wouldn't say a lot, but a normal amount of shares of him. And now I've kind of regressed from that train of thought, and I don't really believe in him as much as I did. It would be really tempting here, assuming that a guy like BTJ or Parker Washington doesn't fall to my next pick. I would be very interested in stacking Jaden Daniels with my Terry McLaurin. Stacks in this are super important and can genuinely win you millions of dollars. And I know that that's historically how this game has played out as we look at trends for who's won this contest in the past. In that week 17, where it's you versus all the other winners, you basically have the same team as everybody else. And it's kind of funny because last year I had an entry that made it all the way. And like every single person had JSN and Chris Olave, right? And a lot of Trevor Lawrence's and a lot of and it ended up being like a Derrick Henry guy that ended up winning because he had 45 in that last week. But all of which to say, it's all about the stack that you take into week 17. So you look at that matchup going into week 17, and you say, okay, what stack has the best chance to perform in that last week of the season where they could potentially win me $1 million? Because if you take Jaden Daniels, which I will be doing, and you've got that pairing with Terry McLaurin, and you're one of the rare few that made it to the finals with that specific stack, and maybe we look to add like a Chig Okonkwo later on in this draft as well, to add to that stack. Let's say that the Commanders score 40 points in that last game of this contest. That's how you win this type of tournament, right? Is by having that explosion by your stack in the last week of the season or the last week of play for this. You want to be able to differentiate yourself, and stacking is a really good way to do that. So we took that stack with our last couple picks between Terry McLaurin, Jaden Daniels. I do think that Jaden Daniels has become a little bit underrated this year and is going, and I'm going to just use some ADP here. So we've got obviously the first 2 dual threat quarterbacks off the board at 25 and 28. Joe Burrow went off the board at 35. And listen, I don't think that, and I'm a Bengals homer, right? I've got not the Bengals on today. I've got the Cleveland Browns, legend Odell Beckham Jr. Bengals homer, obviously very biased. I love Joe Burrow, but I don't think he deserves to be 30 whole spots ahead of Jaden Daniels, a guy who's going to run, who's going to throw. Fantastic in his rookie season. Obviously was just injured last year, which I'll give him a pass for what could be considered poor play. He never really had the chance to play last year. And so I think he'll come back with a vengeance this year, and I'm excited to see what he does. We're on the clock. We've got a couple names in front of us. And we're looking at like a Jaylen Warren type of player. Might be a little bit ugly. Ramondre Stevenson. I probably do want to go with another flex position. Yeah. Looking at who we've got and what we need, I think we go ahead and pull the trigger on Ramondre Stevenson. I think people forget, and listen, I know, this is a guy that obviously will split carries with TreVeyon Henderson. That's a given. But if you look at the end of the season, which is really when the Patriots made their run and where they made their money, Ramondre was fantastic, right? If you read off the list of games starting from week 13 before their week 14 bye, he had 11, 10.7, 17.8, 27.2, 38.3, and then obviously into the playoffs, he continued getting a lot of carries and targets. This is a guy who's still going to get between 10 and 15 carries at minimum a game, and obviously the Patriots trust him a lot. I don't think it's going to all of a sudden become the TreVeyon Henderson show, and I do think that TreVeyon is good. Obviously a fantastic real-life football player. Good problem for the Patriots to have. But I don't think he's going to just magically take an 80% usage rate while Ramondre Stevenson is still there. And you get that added benefit of if something were to happen to TreVeyon Henderson, obviously we've got the premium handcuff probably in the entire league to where he's got standalone value and he does command that 90% snap share should TreVeyon go down. I also noticed I don't have a ton of shares of him, so that did factor into the pick. Would not have been mad with a Jaylen Warren selection there or even reaching for somebody like a Michael Wilson. Couldn't be upset with something like that. And so I just think I need to share a Ramondre for this draft with how I'm shaping up to be. That way I've got two steady presences at the running back position in Josh Jacobs and Ramondre Stevenson to prop up those bad weeks from Achane that are bound to happen, alongside my three wide receivers who I'm very, very happy about. I think this is the type of team to where if Jaden Daniels and Terry McLaurin have great seasons, and then my running backs do okay, and Devon Achane is afloat in that Miami offense, I think this team is in good shape, right? I project JSN to be a top 5 wide receiver, obviously as like a floor. Zay Flowers could be in the top 10. I think he was, wide receiver 7 last year? I mean, geez, and he really came on towards the end of the season. I'm bullish on him. I think like 75, 80 yards a game is a given. He just needs to make up for it with those touchdowns, and that was starting to come into play here at the end of the season. But you look at the game log, and he had 1 touchdown through, oh my gosh, that's like 14 weeks of the season, he had 1 touchdown. If he regresses positively, in any sense of the how variation works, I think Zay Flowers is due for a big season. We are almost back on the clock. Jumping back over into who's available, we're looking at a Chuba Hubbard who has been just dropping down draft boards like a fly over the course of the past month. Jonathan Brooks has been coming out of the woodwork as a guy who could take a lot of that lion's share of carries. I don't know if I necessarily believe that. I do think that my pick is locked in here, and it's got to be Michael Wilson. As much as I wouldn't hate having Chuba Hubbard here, I just don't think he's a difference maker, whereas I think Michael Wilson is being severely underrated. Here in round 8? I mean, I took him at the 8-7, guys. This is pick 90, and we're talking about a guy that last year finished the season from week 11 on with scores of 36, 24, 6, 40, 16, 13, 19, and 20. I mean, you talk about a guy that is criminally underrated this year. It's Michael Wilson. Like, that is an alpha wide receiver 1 if I've ever seen one. And we look at where Marvin Harrison went on this draft board at 68. I don't hate Marvin Harrison. In fact, I think that's a good value too. But Michael Wilson is a locked and loaded guy that could get you those spike weeks if the trend continues where Arizona has to air the ball out all the time, every single game. Now, do I think that Jacoby Brissett is going to throw the ball 50 times every game of the season? Absolutely not, right? That was an anomaly. They were behind by so much, and they just let it rip. That definitely contributed to Michael Wilson getting 18, 15, 7, 16, 11, 3, and 10 targets in his last couple games of the season. I don't expect that that's going to happen again, but if he does have games like that where they get behind, I mean, that's a guy that's going to score for you that we've gotten as our fourth wide receiver in the 9th round or in the 8th round. And so we've rounded out our positional players really nicely here with 3 running backs, 4 wide receivers, and a quarterback. We are looking tight end here as I kind of think to myself at what my team needs. There is a player that I'm super high on here that I think in Draftkings specifically, best ball, is criminally underrated. George Kittle was just selected before him. Sam Laporta was selected before him. We've got Harold Fannin. We're representing the Browns, obviously, today, and we'll be representing him on our draft board as well. Here at pick 102, we grab a guy who I think his floor is genuinely a top 6 or 7 tight end. And he was selected as the, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8th, 9th, 10th tight end off the board. I mean, that to me is crazy. I think he very well should be in the Tucker Kraft tier and ahead of Kyle Pitts. Certainly George Kittle, I think you can make a case for him coming back strong and having a good season. He really turned it on at the end of the year last year. Harold Fannin is Cleveland's alpha target, and no matter what else happens in that room, he's going to get his. He's always going to be on the field. Obviously now with Njoku gone, he's the tight end that's getting touches. Now, are those touches going to be valuable? Probably not, right? But sometimes tight ends on bad teams do really, really well, and that's almost what we look for. As kind of that released valve for like a Shadur Sanders or Deshaun Watson. Doesn't matter who's throwing him the football. I think they're going to scheme up a lot of touches for him. People forget, too, he was a rookie last year and didn't really get on the field all that much and get involved 100% of the time with Njoku being there. I think his departure, David Njoku, going to the Chargers, signals to us as the fantasy football community that Harold Fannin is going to step into just a massive role. Again, I know they drafted 2 wide receivers. They've got Casey Conception and Denzel Boston, as well as Jerry Jeudy and Isaiah Bond. Like, they've got a lot of pass catchers, but I think that all of those guys will be competing for kind of the second fiddle role behind Harold Fannin. So I'm locked and loaded on Harold Fannin. I think he's one of my most drafted players as far as target share or target percentage is concerned here in this format. Harold Fannin is sitting at like 35 for me because I think you can reliably wait until pick 100 and nobody's really reaching up for him, whereas I think he's a value starting in like the 80s or 90s. So I punt on tight end. I rely on Harold Fannin being there at like 90 or 100. I did kind of play the game that he'd get back around me. If not for that, I'd kind of just have punted tight end at the very end. But you definitely benefit in this format from having that premium option at the position. And so over guys like Blake Corum, Ricky Pearsall, Jacoby Myers, Matthew Golden, I would much rather have a locked and loaded guy who's going to be scoring a ton of points from the tight end position to supplement what is already a very strong team. So as we look at what my team needs, obviously we've got a quarterback locked and loaded. We've got running back, 3 of those, 4 wide receivers and a tight end. It is good, obviously, to have more than one quarterback that can score for you, especially, say, if injuries took shape. Same thing with the tight end position. At the 1Z slot, you need those backups that can score for you. But since we've got what I consider to be premium options at both, I'm not too concerned with that in the short term, especially with the run on quarterbacks here. We'll see what the players are looking like as we get up in a couple picks. But as of right now, I'm probably looking towards a flex position. There is a world where I could go for a Dalton Kincaid and double up on that tight end position and then not really have to worry about it for the rest of the draft. I'm almost tempted to do so, and I think I may have had he not gone the pick before me. And so we're faced with kind of an interesting decision here between a couple running backs and a couple wide receivers. I don't think I'd pull the trigger on a guy like Kyler Murray. He is kind of the last, him and Baker Mayfield, the last of that tier of kind of guy there, but I think we can wait on that a little bit more to grab our second quarterback. Who I will take is Jordan Mason. And I think this comes from a couple different reasons. One is that I kind of believe he's going to get a lot of the first and second down carries in Minnesota. Aaron Jones is old. Like, I hate to say it, I like Aaron Jones a lot. Always been a good player, always been a fun player to have on your team. But I worry about him falling off the age cliff. I worry about injury. I don't think he's going to be super involved in early downs in the Minnesota offense. And I think that offense is going to be better. I think Jordan Mason's going to be the goal line back. And if I can have a couple spike weeks from him, where a spike week might look like 15, right, or 20, where he gets 15 carries for 70 yards and a touchdown, couple passes too, that's a win right there. So we are a little bit weaker on our running back side of things, but I think between like the committee of Jordan Mason, Ramondre Stevenson, Josh Jacobs, and Devon Achane, I don't hate where I'm at. So with that in mind, I'm definitely looking for a wide receiver here in this next selection, just because I've got 4 of them. And while I do anticipate that the guys that I've got are going to be my wide receiver and flex scorers every week, you never know what's going to happen. And we want those guys with those spike weeks who could reliably take up some scoring positions as we get down to it. I would have looked towards, and I still also might consider Chigakonkwo, but I think it'd be too early to reach for him, although he might not come back around. So that would be really my only other consideration. Oh, I'm on the clock here. Didn't even realize. Baker Mayfield is kind of calling my name too, is kind of that last remaining good quarterback, but I think we might wait on that one. Yeah, I think we wait on that one more round. And I think we play the ADP game here. I think we punt on that tight end, as much as it would be fun to stack that. I think we're going to go with a wide receiver, and I think we're going to go with Casey Conception. I know I just talked up Harold Fannin, and as you're making that bet of Harold Fannin, you're making that bet that the Browns offense is not going to be terrible, and it still might be, right? But I like taking that flyer on a rookie breakout, selected in the first round of the draft, that I think will carve out a big role as time goes on in this offense. Was it the correct pick? Should I have gone with somebody like a Baker Mayfield that could reliably score for me on down weeks for Jaden Daniels? Maybe. But listen, with 30-second picks, you got to take a flyer on some guys that you believe in. And KC is a guy that I do believe in. I think he's going to command a lot of target share as well. I don't believe in Jerry Jeudy. I don't think he's very good. I don't think he's going to be a guy that can be an alpha wide receiver in the NFL. And I think that they took a chance on Casey Conception and Denzel Boston with the hope that one of them can be that guy. So I'm rolling out 2 Browns in honor of the Browns jersey. That was kind of a secondary motivation there for me. We'll see how that plays out. Could backfire on me horribly, but at this point in the draft, we're looking for guys with upside that we can take. And I think Casey is a guy that could provide that for me. With our next pick, I probably should look back into that onesie position for a guy like a Chigakonkwo to stack with my Washington team already, or a Cam Ward, a CJ Stroud, who I think might have just gotten selected. Yeah, I think CJ Stroud is probably undervalued in this. It would be a good idea for me to look at Sam Darnold, but I think he got selected too. Yeah, could have been fun for me to have that stack as kind of a secondary there for those down Washington weeks. And obviously, if JSN has a really good game, a lot of that is from the beneficiary of Sam Darnold, obviously. And so that means that Sam Darnold has that good game as well. So probably erred in my last pick there and could have gone with a guy like Sam Darnold or Baker Mayfield. But, you know, you live and you learn. Up in a couple picks, quarterback situation is looking a little bit sparse here. We might be going towards that more of a hero QB build with some late round flyers on like a Jacoby Brissett with the way that this is turning out. Chigakonkwo does get taken off the board. I was a little bit worried about that, but that's okay. That means we can focus back on what really matters in this type of draft, which is our running back room and our wide receiver room. Again, I'm kind of punting tight end. I'm kind of punting quarterback. Cam Ward is still available. I could look there. Could look at a guy like Bill, but I think the running back that I would go with here is probably Charbonnet. But the more and more I think about it, the more it makes sense to lock in another quarterback. I think Cam Ward is probably the last good quarterback on the board. Bryce Young could have been another consideration. But I believe in that rookie step forward for him. I think he's got more options here down in Tennessee, and I think that offense is going to be marginally better. At the very least, they're going to be throwing the ball a whole heck of a lot. And so you'll notice this is where guys start to really stack quarterbacks, especially if it's the first couple that they've taken. So you kind of either get your premium quarterback, like a Josh Allen, a Lamar Jackson, a Joe Burrow, and then wait until here to draft like number 2 and 3. Or you draft like a ton of quarterbacks in a row, right? Like this guy went Justin Herbert, Bo Nix, and Jackson Dart. Quarterbacks score a lot of points. And so if Jackson Dart has 40 in a week for this guy, I mean, that wins him the week potentially. So not a terrible pick. I think I tend to gravitate more towards those flex players, obviously because 4 wide receivers score in theory, but to each their own. And so I think there's a lot of strategies that could win in this. And you guys, it is almost time to draft my favorite player of potentially this entire offseason and potentially this entire fantasy football season. I am hoping that he makes it back to me. I think that, my team is already good. If I get this guy, and you already probably know who I'm talking about. No, oh my gosh, that was it. Oh, Jalen Naylor goes the pick before me. Talk about a guy that I absolutely love this year. It's Jalen Naylor. Who else in Las Vegas besides Brock Bowers is going to catch passes? I think he's a steal wherever you can get him in the draft. Draft him in the first round. I don't care where you take him. I just think that he's going to have a fantastic season as really the only good wide receiver in that room. I do think, obviously I would have taken Jalen Naylor. I think without him on the board, Bryce Young is the obvious choice. Just because we've now completed our QB room with 3 quarterbacks, so that let's say that something were to happen to Jaden Daniels, I'm still in a good position. Probably should not have prioritized quarterback as much as I did. Probably could have taken a Jalen Naylor or a Charbonnet there at pick 139. But you just run the risk that those guys would fly off the board, and then you're stuck with your QB2 being Aaron Rodgers, right? And you don't want that. That kind of tanks your team. So happy to have that kind of steady presence at QB. I think the strength of my flex players allows me to probably spend more on quarterbacks than I would have imagined otherwise. Let's say that I didn't get like a Josh Jacobs and Terry McLaurin here and got like a Christian Watson and Cam Scatterbo. I think that's a great example. I think in that spot, I'd want to take more risks on my quarterbacks just because I need more flex players to round out that lineup, right? For the weeks that Christian Watson scores 3 or 5 or 2, right? There are going to be weeks where he scores 20, and then there are going to be weeks where he's schemed out of the game and doesn't really play a whole lot of the big plays for Green Bay. I think he will be the alpha, but again, he's more of that boomer bust downfield guy. So here, anyways, as I get back to it, Jalen Naylor is a guy that I love this offseason. Who else is going to catch passes? It's that thing that I talked about in the tips and tricks episode where what is this person's path to volume? And I think Jalen Naylor, that's very simple for him, right? He's a guy that they brought in to be the alpha wide receiver on this team. Or at the very least, he'll get the run to start the season as the guy. I think they paid him the money to be the guy. And I think behind Brock Bowers, with Kirk Cousins and potentially Fernando Mendoza later in the season throwing the good football, I don't think that team's going to be bad, right? I think they might win 4 or 5 games. And I think if they do that, then a lot of it comes down to what weapons do they have beyond Bowers and Genty. Obviously, the offense is going to flow through those two, but I'm on the clock, and so I should stop thinking about it. I could take a flyer on Trey Tucker as kind of the counterpoint to that Jalen Naylor. Will he get those spike weeks of 40? And so I am thinking a little bit about that. Hunter Henry's off the board. I think I'll do it. I think I'll take Trey Tucker. Haven't been super high on Trey Tucker this offseason just because I'm so high on Jalen Naylor, and you can't really have it both ways. But I'm not really betting that this is going to be a playable player in redraft. I'm betting that this is going to be a guy that in best ball can have 3 or 4 weeks where he scores. Is the target share going to be there on a consistent basis? Absolutely not, right? But will he have spike weeks? Probably. And that's a bet that we're making. Listen, we need 20 of these bets to pay off, and I've got 150 tickets through which that can happen. So it's good to have exposure kind of the other way. If you're really high on a guy like Jalen Naylor and you've got him in, let's say, 40% of your drafts, it's good to hedge with a guy like Trey Tucker at the very least too. So that if your bet on Jalen Naylor is completely incorrect, then you've got kind of that backup option too. So I don't hate it. Denzel Boston would have been another name that I would have considered, but I've already got KC, so there's really no need for that, and that would be a separate bet. Plus, that would be 3 Browns, and even though I've got the Browns legend OBJ jersey on, it's too many Browns, right? I would say this whole team actually is built on bad players on bad teams, or good players on bad teams. Between Achane and then like a Michael Wilson, Harold Fannin, Jordan Mason. I don't know how the Vikings are going to be. KC, Cam Ward, Bryce Young, Trey Tucker. I'm on the clock. I didn't even realize. All right. Who have we got up at the top of the queue? We've got like an Algier. We've got almost no interest in him. Antonio Williams, A.D. Mitchell, Jerry Jeudy. I think I will pull the trigger on one of these two guys just because, man, and that's kind of a tough one. I think I'll take the secondary stack here with another Washington wide receiver. I have no problem if you tell me that you've got A.D. Mitchell ranked ahead of Antonio Williams, but I also have no problem if you don't even know who those guys are. Antonio Williams, rookie wide receiver out of Washington. Listen, we talk about path to target share again, and this is a guy that was drafted pretty high in the NFL draft. And beyond Terry McLaurin and maybe Chig Okonkwo, who traditionally has not been that good and that much of an offensive weapon, who else is going to catch passes? And if they don't sign a guy like Brandon Ayuk, who is turning into the new Antonio Brown and not really made himself available for the Commanders to go and grab him, to say the least. I know that Brandon Ayuk has said time and time again that he is going to sign with the Commanders. I just see it less and less likely with every passing day and week. And so I think, assuming that the Commanders don't grab a Stephon Diggs or a Keenan Allen or a Deebo Samuel, which could happen, I think he'll be their wide receiver 2. And I think the wide receiver 2 in a Washington offense led by Jaden Daniels is very valuable. And so where we're sitting, we've got 7 wide receivers. We'll probably chill there for a moment. I do need a tight end. I'm sitting at 1 tight end, so I'm really asking a lot of, and they're starting to fly off the board. I think I should probably go tight end here unless there's somebody that jumps out at me, but nobody's really getting excited by Jaden Blue or Sean Tucker. I think I'll go with A.J. Barner here and grab that kind of foil to JSN. Would have been good to have Sam Darnold as well, but I think A.J. Barner is going to be a serviceable tight end in this format to where he'll give me that reliable 7 or 8 points on the weeks that Harold Fannin's not available. I think I probably have to double back with another tight end here, at least in the next round or two. And I'd be looking at a guy like Mike Gesicki or Evan Ingram to kind of pick up the slack there. I think that could be the one miss in this draft so far, is that maybe I punted tight end a little bit too far for not having went with like a Trey McBride or a Brock Bowers. And Brock Bowers was a consideration here. But then if we flip those two, right? If we go Brock Bowers at 19 and I don't have Achane, then Ramondre Stevenson is my RB2, right? So I don't hate it. I think that this is a fine draft. I think my team is still good. Ultimately, best ball, you never know what's going to happen because it is, again, a parlay of 20 people. And so some team that you think is going to be the worst that went 4 running backs in the first 5 rounds, right? Like if everybody else's team gets injured, or the guy that went Lamar Jackson in round 3. I think, you never know what's going to happen. You never know who's going to pop off and what's going to pay off in a contest like this. So I'm up again in 2 picks. I'm definitely looking at either the tight end position or the running back position. If I don't select a tight end, I'm really banking on the fact that one of these guys comes back around. I think I will do that, and I think I'll go running back here. And it's really between like a Sean Tucker or a Nick Singleton. And neither of those are super exciting. I think, as much as, again, it may seem irrelevant, these are the guys that could win leagues, and I'll take Nick Singleton. I believe in the Titans' ability to carve out a role for him. I think he was really good in college at Penn State. And while you may not even know who this is, I think Nick Singleton could be a factor for the Titans. And plus, it pairs with Cam Ward pretty nicely. So that does play a little bit of a role. I think Sean Tucker, I think Bucky's going to be more of a factor than people realize, and especially versus where he's being drafted at like 60. He's also got Kenny Gainwell there. And I think between those two, I don't know that there's going to be much opportunity for Sean Tucker to be on the field. Whereas I think it's much more attainable for a Nick Singleton to make it onto the field ahead of like a Tyjae Spears, right? Or ahead of a Tony Pollard. I still think Tony Pollard's good. I'm high on Tony Pollard. I've never been all that high on Tyjae Spears. I think he's a decent real-life NFL football player. But I think that they're going to scheme touches for Nick Singleton. And I believe in that. So, and again, these are the guys too. You're drafting for contingencies at this point. Should something happen to either of those running backs from Tennessee, he becomes very valuable. And I think Tony Pollard's dealt with that in the past. I think we have to grab a tight end here. As much as it would be tempting to grab like a Katron Allen, I don't want to be stuck into a position where I have to pull the trigger on one of these guys that may not score all season. I know that Evan Ingram has a lot of target competition. I still think he's going to be serviceable. Obviously, he's never going to have those spike weeks, but at this point in the draft, when my tight end room is not that strong anyway, and we're relying on Harold Fannin for a lot of it, I think it makes sense to grab a guy like Evan Ingram, who during, at the very least, Harold Fannin's bye, can give you 7 points, right? And can give you 12 or 13 here and there. So very weak at the tight end position, strong at quarterback, I believe, and very, very strong in my flex spots, especially for my starters. Would have been great, and I think this team would have been perfect had I also been able to get Jalen Naylor, who I think will be genuinely the wide receiver 30 on the season, between wide receiver 25 and 30, and he's being drafted at 149. I think he's going to be good. That's all I'll say. I'm harping on it probably a little bit too much. Listen, this is the part of the draft where you're calling your shots. You're taking your Hail Marys for the guys that you think might score a couple weeks of the season or could break out. I think it's a great time to draft rookies that you think might not be buried on the depth chart for too long. I don't mind a Katron Allen. Chris Bell is a guy that I'm hopefully going to be looking at when it gets to be my pick. All guys that you want here to be potential breakouts. You don't want a James Conner. You don't really want like a, I'm trying to think of another good example. Somebody who's buried behind a million people. You want guys in like ambiguous situations, like even a Jalen Tolbert, who could go into the year as that team's wide receiver 1. So these are your lottery tickets. I think it would make a lot of sense to take Katron Allen here, especially considering I do need another running back. And as we look past Katron Allen, there's not a lot of guys that I think could be factors. I think we'll do it. I think we'll pull the trigger there. The only other consideration I would have had would be a Chris Bell. I think he could be a guy that when he comes back from his ACL rehab, this is a first-round talent that went to the Dolphins in the 3rd round, and the Dolphins have nobody. And we've already made our bet on the Dolphins with Achane. And I don't know. I mean, somebody's got to catch passes. If at the end of the season it is Chris Bell and he becomes a guy that you could even start in redraft, I mean, I think that that's a good upside shot to take as he gets taken. Even in redraft, you could take a Chris Bell, you could put him on IR at the very end of your draft and grab somebody else. And I love that, right? I think it allows you to hold on to him for the whole season until he comes back, week 7 or 8. He could be the guy. I don't know how valuable the guy is in a Dolphins offense. But regardless, we're going to take another guy on the Dolphins offense that could be the guy. And again, could be Tolbert, could be Malik Washington, could be Chris Bell, could be Caleb Douglas. I want one of those lottery tickets more than I want like a Juju Smith-Schuster or an OBJ, right? That's 34 years old. That gets us into a position where we've made our last pick. Our team is as follows. We went JSN at the 6th pick, which kind of was unexpected, but I'll take it, right? As much as I'm not super bullish on him, I think if he falls to 6, you take it without hesitation. We got Achane at 19, which I love. We got Zay Flowers at 30. Might have been a bit of a reach, but if things go right for him, we're in good shape. Josh Jacobs, rock steady, running back, Green Bay Packers, punching in a lot of touchdowns. Terry McLaurin, who we then paired with Jaden Daniels for that lovely stack between the two of them. I love doing that in best ball. Gives me a chance that if they overperform, it's one less bet I have to make. Ramondre Stevenson, nobody's excited about Ramondre Stevenson, but he could get the job done here once or twice when we need him to, especially if somebody like Josh Jacobs faces legal trouble, which I don't anticipate but could happen. Michael Wilson in the 8th round is fantastic. I love that. Anywhere you can draft Michael Wilson at pick 91, I want you to do it because I think last year showed it's not just a flash in the pan. And he will be a solid part of this offense. Harold Fannin, Jordan Mason, Harold Fannin being our tight end 1. Jordan Mason, Casey Concepcion, we've got Cam Ward, Bryce Young, rounding out our quarterback room. Trey Tucker, upside shot from Vegas. Would have been awesome to get Jalen Naylor. Say it again, draft Jalen Naylor. We've got Trey Tucker. We've got Antonio Williams from the Commanders to pair with Jaden Daniels and Terry McLaurin. AJ Barner and Evan Ingram round out our our tight end room. Rounding out our running back room are Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, a couple rookies that could break out and carve roles in this offense. Katron Allen also pairs with that Washington stack, so the chances of him being good are better if Washington is good, right? And so I like doing that. And then Jalen Tolbert as our last lottery ticket, could be the guy in Miami. That is our team. Let me know how you think I stack up against the rest of the board here, or if there's anything where I really screwed up the draft. But pretty happy with how this went. Again, we draft a lot of these for a reason. Everybody on this roster could get hurt, God forbid, and then it's just a moot point, right? And so we want to give ourselves as much chance at this and as many lottery tickets as we can. Again, it's like placing a 20-leg parlay at, 2,000 to 1 odds. And so if it hits, we win $1 million. If not, no worries. We had fun doing it. And at the end of the day, too, this should show you where some of the inefficiencies are on your draft platforms. Probably didn't talk about it too much, but these are sharp, right? And so if in your draft platform you find that like Michael Wilson is ranked 120th, that's a guy that you should go and get, right? Or that Mike Evans on ESPN is 75, which I think he is. Go and draft him. Parker Washington is ranked at like 90th on ESPN. Really good pick in like the 70s if you can make that happen. So this shows you some of the inefficiencies in the market where it stands right now, to where if you've got any leagues that draft super early, you might be able to get a discount on a guy like AJ Brown that in a league like this is going 18th. You might be able to take him at like a 25 or a 26. All of which to say, another fun episode. I know, again, it's a Mock Draft Monday coming to you on a Wednesday. Pay no mind to that. But fun as always, and be sure to stay tuned for more of these coming up to you soon.